Hello, happy Tuesday, besties and bosses. I actually just realized I need to pull up my group while I'm doing this so that I can see your comments if you're live. How y'all doing? How's everyone's weekend? I'm back in the city. I guess I was back in the city last week. So I'm back in the city, and it has been beautiful summer weather for the most part. This morning was all like gray and gloomy. Now the sun is back out, so we'll see if we have a storm or not. But very much looking forward to our conversation today to dig into how I would coach you if you felt like it's not working in your business to identify and close the right gap. I've got a lot I want to share. I'm very excited for this conversation. Before we dive in, I'm going to make sure that I can see y'all and see the comments. It always means I have to find this conversation in my group, which is always, I don't know how y'all find me when I go live because I cannot find myself. It's very interesting. And while I'm pulling this up, we have a giveaway. I always give something away for most calls we do. There we go. I like to give something away for those of you who join me live in the conversation because obviously I appreciate when you watch in the replay. I know most of you do, but it's so fun for me to get to do these live. I appreciate whether you're watching live or on the replay. It means so much to me. It's always fun to get to hear your questions and make sure that I'm articulating this in a way that makes sense for you and get to hang with you and chat with you. So if you comment hi and emoji while we're live, you'll be entered to win. This week we're giving away a copy of my self-study mini course, which is Sell Without the Sleaze, a proven framework for a 6 and 7 figure sales call. So this walks you through a framework, not a formula. I'm not into formulas or scripts for sales calls, but this walks you through a framework to set up a sales conversation. It has a great playbook with it. It's a mini course. So I will be giving one of those away to someone who's here live. And yeah, let's dive into our conversation today. So much I want to talk on here. First, let's just talk about the phrase, it's not working. So if you're on my email list, you probably got the little blurb around this, and just want to give a little context before we dive into everything, because I'm sure everyone at some stage in their business, I'm sure I have at some stage in my business, has like said, this just isn't working or it's not working. And I think it's very easy when you're frustrated in business to feel that way. And if you're working with a coach, to want to just say to your coach, this isn't working, it's not working, or to your partner or to your best friend or whoever will listen. So this is not to call anyone out. This is not to say like, hey, we don't get to use that phrase. However, with my clients and with myself, I'm a really big no, and I say no in air quotes, to that phrasing. And the reason for this is it tends to be really disempowering. And as soon as we get into the phrase of it's not working, we are creating a definitive and we are telling our brain to just stop looking for solutions. It's not working. We are just stopping the creative problem solving, and it's a really challenging place to get clear on what's going on so that you can identify and close the right gap in your business to have whatever's not working work. So of course, this conversation today is not to say that things always work perfectly. When I said in the email, is a big believer that most strategies work if you work them. Obviously, strategies that make sense, but most strategies work if you work them. But I want to talk a little bit about what it means to work a strategy. I think sometimes we just think that means doing the same thing over and over again and kind of hitting our head against the wall and expecting a different result. It makes me think of the, is it actually Einstein, whoever said that quote, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think that is not what working a strategy until it works means. However, if we know that most strategies work, and when we say it's not working, and we're just putting a definitive stop on that, it does create a challenging point to figure out, well, if most strategies work and this isn't working, how do we get clear on what we need to address, shift, change, refine, so that this can work better for you, what's really going on. So that's what we're gonna have as a conversation today. I'm really big with my clients on encouraging them to, instead of saying it's not working, to bring to the table what they're seeing in their business so that we can problem solve together. So I'm going to walk you through today. If you were feeling frustrated in your business, totally okay. You're allowed to feel frustrated. Business can be frustrating. I love business. I love the process of business. I love the results of business. And business can be challenging sometimes, and I think it's just important to normalize that. But I'm going to walk through, if you were my client and you came to me and you felt like things weren't working, why I would encourage you not to say it's not working. And if you weren't my client, I think why, just to normalize, I think why this can be challenging maybe for your support team, and some of the things to look at so that you can get really clear again on how to solve those problems and gaps in your business. And if you have questions, reflections while I'm going through, you just throw them at me. So first thought here that I think is important to share and I think many of you know this, but it just feels important to give context for, and I was thinking about this for myself. I think one of the things that makes it easier for me to say to you, I really believe that most strategies work if you work them, and to feel very neutral when a client comes to me frustrated in their business. I think it is one of the gifts I have as a coach. I think I'm pretty sure if you ask most of my clients, I'm probably annoyingly neutral sometimes, but I'm pretty neutral and I don't take on my clients' stuff, so to say, because I know they're just being human, and that's why they hired me. It's my job to support them, and it's my job to know that, hey, they're going to have frustrating things, and that's literally like why I have a job and created a space for them to bring that to. But I think one of the reasons it's easier for me to be very neutral, and for me also to trust that, yeah, if something doesn't feel like it's giving the results we want to, that this is something that's, as Marie Forleo would say, figure outable, is that I have been working only one-on-one with clients for 7.5 years now, and I see behind the scenes of so many businesses in various industries, on and offline, in various niches, all day, every day, and I have for that long. So I've also seen various strategies, and I have seen strategies that if you had just asked me, Kim, is this a strategy you would have recommended? Is this the thing you thought would work to book this client out? Is this what you would have, if you were in charge, what you would have picked for them? I probably would tell you, nope. I'm like, that's not what I would have picked. And yet I've watched clients make and get results from so many different strategies that, again, I wouldn't have necessarily picked for them, but it's not my job to pick strategies for my clients. It's my job to help them figure out the right strategy for them to take action on. And so with that, what I've just really been able to see is like, it's really fascinating to me. Obviously I'm not to say this in a nice way, not idiotic strategies. Obviously those aren't necessarily going to work if you don't work them. We have to have some foundational business principles in place and choose strategies that make sense. But I've just been really fascinated at watching clients get results from just so many different strategies if they're in it and taking action consistently, if their mindset's on board, if they want to sell what they're selling, and if we're continually looking at and figuring out what lever needs to be pressed in their business. And something before we dive into this that I just think is so important to normalize. I've been in business for 7.5 years. I have a booked out business. I make great money. I would consider myself a successful business owner and coach. And I'm constantly looking at my business to identify what is the current gap that I need to close. What is the current area of my business that needs addressing? What is the current area of my business that needs up-leveling? What is the current area of my strategy that needs refining? This is something I'm continually looking at and working. And I reflect this before we dive into specifically how I would coach someone around this, because I think this is why it's not useful to say it's not working, because the truth is what we're going to walk through today, and having a strategy in your business and creating results in your business, I think there's this mentality that like there is a perfect way to do business, and when you figure out the perfect way and get things perfectly, you're going to get results and never have to adjust anything. And what I want to offer is there's a strategy that you will work that will get you results, and then no matter how much or whatever kind of results you're getting, you're probably going to have to continue to refine to identify the right gap to close so that it continues to get you results. And so when we say if you work a strategy, it works, or most strategies work if you work them, that's what I really mean by working a strategy. It's not what we were saying earlier, where it's like keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's keep looking at your strategy, and if it's like, and continually looking at what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be up-leveled, what needs action, where do I need to pull back? And that's really what I see create results. So I just wanted to give that as a little preface, both to normalize, because I think that's just helpful to hear, and also to just give some context in terms of where this perspective is coming from. The other thing I just want to give a little context for before we dive in, and this is if I were coaching a client, probably before even the first thing that I would have them look at, that I'd be curious about is how long have they been implementing a specific strategy consistently? Because we've talked about this in so many different ways in this group, but I think it's just, again, helpful to normalize. Strategies take time to yield results, and they're going to take, I think the metric and timeline people used to give is that it takes about 90 days of consistent action for a strategy to play out. And I actually think that can almost be a not harmful, that's maybe not the word I want to use, but I think that can be confusing, because I think there's so many factors and nuances that go into how long a strategy will take to play out. I've definitely implemented strategies that work really quickly. But that's also because I built an audience and built a trust with my audience and have been showing up every day for 7.5 years sharing content. So it's going to look a little different for me if I implement a new strategy. And even then, it's going to take time for that to play out. And it would depend on if I'm doing something that's kind of aligned with what I've already been offering, or if I was suddenly like using a strategy to sell something completely new. Like if I was like, hey, I'm offering a group program next week, which I'm not, versus maybe a brand new business owner who hasn't built up an audience yet, hasn't built up trust, hasn't built up touch points. So what I wanted to say is like big picture, if you're in your head where you're like things aren't working or like that phrase is coming up for you, I think the first place just to always check in and give yourself a little self-coaching is just to be really, really honest with yourself in terms of what season you're in business, what the landscape of your business looks like, and how long and consistently you've been showing up, and if it's that things aren't working or if they've just not had enough time to work yet. The analogy I give my clients quite a lot, you've probably heard me share this before, but I think sometimes we forget that if you plant a seed and water it, it's still going to take a second to grow. But while you're watering it, it's still like growing roots and it's absolutely growing. It's just going to take a second for us to see the growth above ground. And what happens so often with strategy and with business is people will plant some seeds, they'll water them, they won't see growth above the ground, and they'll be like, this shit isn't working. And they'll either neglect those seeds, and so they dry up and stop growing because they're not being watered, or they dig them up to look and see if they're growing, and they kill the seed. And so I think we want to be mindful of that as we're going through. I'm going to give you some specific things I would coach clients on, but I think that's just such a helpful reminder because it's just very easy to forget when you're in the process of watching those seeds waiting for them to grow. Okay, now hopefully that makes sense. But okay, if you came to me and you're like, Kim, it's not working. First, I would probably actually let me rewind the track. Let's actually one more thing I want to talk about before I share what I would coach you through, because I think this is just some other nuance that is helpful to hear. Right? I'm seeing a very big lag on our video here. Y'all don't mind me for 1 second. I'm just making sure our tech is working. I feel like I might need to try a different way to go live next week. Let's see. I was going to do... No. Okay, we're still... This is so strange, y'all. Okay. Yep, okay. I see myself again. Don't mind me. All right, technology seems to be working. So I want to chat about this one piece first before we go into how I'd specifically coach you, because I think this is the other thing that is just important to understand. I'm not hating on the term it's not working, and I really encourage my clients not to use that phrase, and personally I'm a big no for using that myself. For what we were saying earlier, I think again it's such a shutdown in the brain, and it literally stops your creative problem solving and makes it very challenging to find a solution. And what I do encourage my clients to think about, and what I would be thinking about myself, is instead of, when we say it's not working, what we're doing is we're giving all of our power away to business, to the online space, to anything else. And what I think can be helpful instead, and what I encourage my clients to look at, is to acknowledge what you're feeling. So if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling annoyed, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling pissed off, if you're feeling like something's unfair, to acknowledge how you're feeling in a coaching container, to absolutely feel welcome to bring that, like no judgment. Like business can be challenging sometimes, bring your frustration, but there's something so much more. I can support you so much more if you bring what you're feeling for us to process and navigate than just it's not working, which can be very much of a wall or a bit of defensive, or sometimes I'll hear like, instead of it's not working, like, why isn't this working? Or tell me what's not working, or tell me what to do. And I'll tease my clients around that because I have a good relationship with them. But that just, again, creates a very, it's just a very shut conversation, as opposed to permission to feel frustrated, again, angry, whatever the feelings are, like full permission. Like I'm so always happy to hold space for clients around that. No judgment. Like, again, business can be frustrating, and that way you can process the emotion that is probably getting in the way of having some neutral solution oriented thinking. And then I think instead of it's not working, what can be more useful to play with is a helpful question in terms of, what's the right gap to close? What could I lean into to improve this? Where is the opportunity to improve this? And so I think just inviting your brain to play with that. I know I have a podcast, one question, right? Sometimes we just need to ask ourselves better questions to get those better answers. And so instead of like, what's not working, or why isn't this I mean, why isn't this working said in a different tone could actually be beneficial. But I think really playing with what's the opportunity here, what's the right gap to close, what's the opportunity for this to grow or to work better, or what is working even can be just a more helpful frame there. The other reason I want to start with this piece, and I think it's just helpful to speak to, is if you're working with, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. If you're working with a coach or service provider who's maybe newer to business and you're bringing a lot of, it's not working, help me figure this out, why isn't this working, tell me what to do, energy to a call, of course. As coaches, we have a responsibility to hold space and to help you problem solve and to be really neutral, right? Again, I think I'm excellent at being neutral in a call and not taking on my clients' stuff and being really there to support them and not like having anything mean anything about me and just seeing things in the big picture. But I've also been doing this for 7.5 years, probably closer to 8.5, 9 years if I look at coaching. I've been paid as a coach and in business for 7.5 years. So I have lots of practice of knowing that most things work and knowing most things aren't as big of a deal as they seem and knowing that it perfectly feels fine. It's in my zone of genius to hold space for people like that. And I think for someone who's, if you're maybe working with a newer coach who maybe doesn't have that experience, it's not like their fault. I think it can just be a thing. I think it can just be more challenging to get the support you need when, and again, this is not to say your coaches shouldn't be able to hold you in that, but I think just understanding how can you get the most from the support you're investing in. Sometimes the best way to get the most from the support you're investing in is also to show up coachable and to bring the things that help someone help you. I think about this with my team members all the time, right? How can I help my team help me? The more I show up as a CEO and a leader to give them resources and to delegate and to help them understand my process of thinking and to provide them with resources, right? The more I can empower them to do their job, the more they're going to be able to support me. So I think the same can be true if you're bringing this to a coach and for support, and just remembering they're on your team and they're in this to win with you. And I think the more you can take the mentality of course there's a way to make this work, we just haven't figured that out yet, or there's a time gap, how can I show up coachable to either bring my frustration or ask what do we think is the right gap to close? I think the more support you can get, because again, I think someone who's just a little newer to supporting people, I think otherwise that approach can sometimes really cause people to shut down. And again, it is not your job as a client to caretake the coach. I don't want that to be the takeaway from this, but I do think it can shut people down and get your service provider, your coach, your consultant on the more defensive side, or just on the solving the service level problem, instead of showing up in a way where both of you can really collaborate and come to those really great solutions together. So hopefully that made sense. I'm by no means saying there's not a responsibility on the coach side, but I do think this is just a way to get the most out of your coaching investments. So that felt important to say. Other thing that I think is just helpful to know is most of the time when you think it's not working, I say this to my clients all the time, your brain is wired to notice a -3 to 1. So most of the time, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're noticing is rarely as dire as you think it is. So if your brain thinks it's a big catastrophic problem, that's because that's what your brain's wired to do. Your brain is wired to keep you safe. I always talk about your brain is not wired for success, it's wired for survival. It's wired to avoid pain, seek pleasure. So if you've planted a seed and you've watered it and you can't see it sprouting yet, your brain is just wired to notice that is a problem, not to notice, oh, that must mean the seed is growing and everything's going just fine, because that didn't keep you fed in the winter, right? Your brain was like, we got to make sure these plants and crops are growing. Otherwise, we could be starving in the winter. So I think just remembering your brain is wired to notice negative events 3 to 1. So when you feel like it's not working, most likely your brain is creating a heightened experience from what is actually true. And I think that can be very helpful. And again, what our brains like to do is look for a problem to solve. It is actually how we feel safe. A lot of times I'll coach my clients to go find a better problem. I literally said to my client last week, you need to go get some better problems, because your brain is just wired to look for problems. So I want to share that because a lot of times when you think it's not working, it actually probably is working more than you think. Your brain's either not seeing what's working or is looking for a problem that maybe isn't even the right problem or gap to solve, because again, that is a safety survival mechanism. The other thing I think is just worth naming naming is, it's also really tricky in the online space because all day, every day, if you're in the online space, you're seeing results, not the process behind results. You're seeing someone who is showing the photo of that seed they planted, but that's a full crop. You're rarely seeing someone who's planted a seed and watered it and been weeding for years and like planting more seeds and watering more seeds and getting fertilizer and tilling the ground and I don't know, whatever we could take that analogy, right? You're rarely seeing the process. You're almost always seeing the crop. And so it can be very challenging if all you're seeing are crops and results all day long without the process. When you're in the process and you haven't seen the crop yet, to think that there's a disconnect and something wrong. And so I want to invite you just to normalize that, but to know for every crop you see online, for every result you see online, there is a process behind it, and no one is exempt to that process. Like no one has some like miracle grow that is speeding up that process. Everyone's got a process they're working behind the scenes. They might have different plants and crops, you know what I mean, that they're, or like fertilizer, or like a ground that they're starting with, but other than that, like everyone has a process that they have to go through. Like no one gets to avoid that on the back end. So I think that can just be helpful to normalize. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, all the prefacing thing. Let's talk a little bit though on, okay, so we feel like it's not working. We understand all these different things. We're gonna not come in all defensive. We're gonna not like put up a wall in terms of like, this doesn't work. We're feeling frustrated. We're gonna process our frustration. But then if we're like, okay, but like there, like something's up here. Like this doesn't seem like it's working the way it could. I feel like there's a gap. There's something we could close. Like how do we improve the strategy? How do we, like on the flip side, there's always stuff we could take a look at. What I'm looking at with clients, so when I'm coaching clients, I'm going to just walk you kind of through a flow chart, really in the order I would often be thinking of these things in is almost always, I'm saying made up stat, but 90% of the time, it's either your clarity, your mindset, your strategy, or your action that needs attention. That I always think of it as like a lever or a gap to close that we want to identify. Is it clarity? Is it mindset? Is it strategy? Or is it action? So that you're like, this is the place that if I like go tap on this, go work on this, this is going to help improve the way my strategy is working for me or the way my business is working. And again, at every stage of business, this continues to be true, and we want to get clear on which of these pieces it is. So aside from the just the overall, like just checking in with the timeline piece and being realistic, usually the first place I'm checking in with clients is on their mindset. And the reason for this, and I think what's important to say is it can be more than one thing, right? It could be mindset and strategy. It could be mindset, strategy, and action. It could be clarity, mindset, strategy, and action. It's not to say if we identify something that means nothing else matters, but I think there is an order in which addressing these different gaps in your businesses can support your business as a whole. And look, I think strategy, and like you don't have a business without strategy and action. Sorry, not sorry. Like you just don't. You need both. Said with love. And it's very challenging for us to take a look at your business and to problem solve if your nervous system is completely jacked up, if you're feeling deregulated, if you're super in fear, if you're super in anxiety, if you're super riled up, if you're super defensive, right? If there's something going on mindset-wise, it's why I talk so much about being in your CEO role and managing your mind to manage your business. That is what mindset is. I think I might be doing a live stream or podcast on this coming up because I think sometimes we hear mindset and I think we think that just means to either like be perfectly high vibe all the time or positive all the time or to like never have issues. And I think that's just so whack because that's just not having a human experience. I think of mindset as how are you managing your mind so that you can show up in your role as a CEO to manage your business, meaning that usually how can you get to neutral and not like if you do have mindset stuff coming up, how can you process it, work through it again so you can be neutral too? Look at these other components, the clarity, the strategy, and action to make strategic, clear decisions like a business owner instead of like someone who's in fear or instead of like someone who's feeling really defensive or who's taking things really personally. So hopefully that makes sense there. But this is the first thing I'm usually looking at because again, it's just really, really tough if you're super in scarcity and fear that you're not going to have enough money, or if you're feeling super vulnerable because you think everyone's rejecting you and everyone hates you and your content sucks, or if you're feeling, I mean, there's so many different things that could be coming up here, right? Or if you're feeling super emotional because you think this is never going to work, and like that means you're not good enough and you knew you weren't good enough and like nothing ever works, right? If there's a lot coming up here, it kind of doesn't matter what we identify on the clarity, strategy, or action side, because the mind's not going to be in a place to take a look at that and to be able to execute in a way that really serves your business. So this is just the first place I would check in with. So if it's not working, first thing I check in with is, do you feel heightened emotions? Do you feel heightened thoughts? Are you feeling super jacked up? No shame. Like, welcome to being human. Never a judgment there. We always talk about compassionate curiosity, but this would be like step one. The problem, the gap to close, the problem to solve is mindset. And I would just say like, oh, my whole job now, if it feels like it's not working, is first to get myself back to just being able to manage my mind and feeling a little bit more neutral. Neutral is like my favorite mindset in the entire world. Power of neutrality. It's really effing powerful. And this would just be the first place I would look to before anything else. If it feels like it's not working, I would just say, like, this is my full-time job right now. This is just see, can I get to neutral? So hopefully that makes sense. Hey, Stephanie. Hello. How are you? I just saw your comment there. And anyone else, say hi. Don't forget, if y'all, I don't think you were on when I said this, we are giving away a copy of my mini course, Sell Without the Sleaze. It walks you through a framework for setting up a sales call and has a worksheet for it. It is not a script. It is not a script at all, but it's more a framework to help you set up a call without the yuck and the ick in a really service-driven way that works for bringing in more sales. Hey, Jen. Hey, Sarah. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing all the comments now. Sarah says mindset is so important. Yes, I love y'all. Thanks for saying you're here. It's nice to know that I'm not talking to myself. I love y'all very much. And yes, mindset is so important. So that's always the first place I would check in with. Okay, so we've checked in with mindset. This doesn't mean, okay, if you were jacked up and we get to neutral, now we don't have to look at anything else in business. Of course not. I wouldn't have a job otherwise. I wouldn't still be working with my coach otherwise. Remember, this is an ongoing process. We're always checking in with things. But once you get to neutral, the next place I would look at is clarity. So the reason for this is, I think, even for my business owners who are making 7 figures or who are at multi-6 figures, right, who are further along, I think we just always assume we have clarity. And I think sometimes when things feel like they're not working the way they should, when we're not getting the results we want to, sometimes we just have a clarity gap, or we thought we had clarity and we're kind of like being a little general, or we think we know what our goal is, but we're kind of focused on something else. So sometimes I'll just have clients check back in with, are we really clear on what we're currently selling? I know this is so obvious, y'all. Like, I know sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, no one doesn't know this, but when you're busy, when you're serving clients, when you're creating marketing, when you're doing lots of stuff all day long, it's easy to think you're clear on this or that your team is clear on this, right? Sometimes the clarity gap is with your team. And to step back and be like, oh, like, the reason it's not working is I kind of forgot what I was selling, and I kind of forgot what our current sales goal was. So, like, do we have clarity on that? Are we clear on our strategy? If I ask you, like, what are you showing up for today, tomorrow, next week? Like, do we know our process? Are we clear on that? Sometimes we literally don't have clarity on that. Are we clear on the customer journey? Are we clear on messaging? Have we updated that recently? Do we have clear and specific messaging? Right? Or is this sort of like more generic, or have we not revisited in a while? So I usually want to look at the clarity piece first. Now, this might not be something I'm always asking a client about because I'm talking to my clients regularly. And oftentimes I know because of our conversations where they're at with things, but these are the things I'm wondering and thinking about. If they're like, hey, this, like, it doesn't feel like this is working, or like they're bringing to the table, like, here's what I'm noticing in my business, like, can you support me with this? And I'm going to keep coming back to, truly, this is how my clients show up to calls, and I think this is why they get such great results, because rarely does a client come to me and say it's not working. Clients come to me and say, hey, I'm frustrated. Great, they're allowed to have emotions, right? We work through emotions, we work through mindset, and then they're like, here's what I'm noticing, here's what's going on, like, here's what's going on in my business, like, I'm not understanding, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, why is it, like, why are we not bringing in more leads or more clients? But they're bringing in things like a business owner who's taking audit of their business or asking for help with that, instead of like hands up in the air, like figure it out. Because that, again, when someone does that, they're giving their power away to me, and I don't want anyone's power. I want to give it back to my clients all day, every day. So I'm just reflecting that again back to everyone, because I think that can just be so helpful. So checking in with that clarity piece, I think, can just be, again, super simple, but just an easy place to check in, because sometimes it's really simple if you're like, oh, right, my goal right now, I wasn't clear on it, but my goal is that I want to sell into this group program, but I've been promoting one-on-one, and I've been promoting this freebie, and I've been promoting this $27 course and my group program. Like, I'm not even clear on what I'm selling. How can my audience be clear on it? Like maybe that's the first gap to get clear on. So I would check in there. The next place, and I know it's going to sound like the next place we want to look at is strategy, but I actually, in my mind, like as I'm going through this, the next place I really want to look at is action before strategy. The reason for this is if we've gotten clear on like, do they have a clear strategy? Do they know what they're showing up for? That's the clarity piece. If that's kind of like, no, we actually don't know the strategy, of course, we're going to then stop. And it's like, well, that's the gap for us to close, right? Or if it's like, we don't have a clear sales process, or we don't have a clear customer's journey, or we don't have clear and specific messaging, we're going to stop there, right? Like that's the gap to close. After that, if it's sort of like, things still feel like, I don't understand why results aren't coming in, I'm going to want to take a look at action, because if we have clarity on strategy and like before we go in refining and tweaking things, I want to know if my clients are actually showing up for that strategy, and if they're showing up consistently and for how long and with what kind of energy. So I'm going to break this down a little bit because I think this is important to understand. What I find can happen is when we've like gotten the mindset, we're in neutral. We like didn't have clarity. We got clarity on our sales goal. We got clarity on our sales process. We got clarity on our customer journey and what we're showing up for. I think what can be very easy to do is, because you have now spent, like, I'm just making this up, but let's just say that it took a little bit of time and that was a month worth of like process. In your mind, you're like, I've been working this for a month. I still don't have a result? And what I want to check in with is like, of course, compassion. That's just a lot of work, mindset wise, getting clarity wise. But I want to look at like, if we don't have a result, have we been showing up consistently every day for that month, or have we been working through mindset and clarity? Like, have we been working on other things that are super, super important, but not that are money generating, forward moving actions in your business? If not, like, there might not actually be a problem here. It might just be that what we were talking about earlier, there might just simply have not been enough action touch points that have happened for a result to show up. It might be that you actually finally got the right seeds, right? And finally planted it and just started watering it, but we only planted the seed 2 days ago, and it is growing. It's just not fair for us to say it's not growing because we can't see it above the ground yet. So I always want to check in here, and this isn't from a like, have you been taking action every day mindset, but just to really, sometimes I'll have my clients time track. Sometimes I'll have my clients, I will be the annoying pain in the ass coach sometimes. I'm like, well, let's pull up your social media and take a look at what's been going on. But just to see, like, are we showing up consistently? It doesn't have to be every day. Everyone has a different consistency schedule. And for how long on the same strategy to sell the same offer, right? So that doesn't mean I've been showing up every day, but it's been to promote this thing and to promote this thing. And then I decided that didn't work and to promote this thing. But how long have we been showing up consistently to offer, to sell, to promote the same thing? I always want to check in with that first and foremost, because if it's been just a couple days, the gap to close is probably an action gap, and then it's like, great. So like now we're in the watering the plant phase and nurturing the plant and making sure it gets enough sunshine, making sure you don't dig it up or that you don't overwater it. And like the lever to press is action. The lever we want to not press is strategy, because this is the place I think it's really tricky, where if it's not working, in air quotes, what I think a lot of people want to do is get into strategy, and they're like, how can I make my strategy better? What do I need to fix? What do I need to change? What do I need to adjust? And this does not mean that there might not be things to adjust and change, but a lot of times things are better than, remember we talked about earlier, your brain notices a negative 3 to 1. Your brain is looking for problems. Most things aren't as dire as you think they are. I'm sure any of my clients who watch now on the replay will roll their eyes, and I want to see this comment, and will roll their eyes, because I must say on more calls than anything else, like, do we actually have a problem? Like, is this actually a problem? Because it's just so easy to decide there is a problem and there's something you need to fix. And again, it's not to say, like, look, if you go and look at my strategy, if you go and look at my messaging, if you go and look at my copy, if you sign up on my email list, I guarantee you could with no problem find lots of things I need to fix and problems, but that doesn't actually mean strategically those are great things for me to spend time and energy on if my strategy is working for me when I have other things to focus on in my business, like serving my clients. And so this is why, like, this is just such a tricky, not tricky, but just an opportunity to notice that sometimes it is really checking in with that action piece and really being honest with yourself there, instead of what I think the brain wants to do, and I think what can just feel so yummy to our brains and so self-soothing is like, nope, this means I'm fucking things up. Let me go find that thing and rework it. Because sometimes all that's doing is digging up the seed you just planted and making yourself start all over again. Stephanie says, you can't be too clear. I have to always make sure I'm clear of what I'm doing, and if it aligns. Yes, thank you for saying that. It's just so true. Just what Stephanie's saying. Y'all know I joined the gym across the street and I've been spinning. But I just recently started adding in more like weight training type stuff because I want to be fitter in my 40s, y'all. I want to be stronger. And it was just so funny because like I know fitness, I know the gym, I know what I do. And it was just such an interesting reminder because I went with my husband the other day of how important it was just to have clarity of like, right, but I don't want to just be fit. I want to be stronger. I want to build muscle because I know as you get older that muscle loss is a real thing. And like not to get into all the health stuff, but I just know how important that is. And not only that, like, so being as specific as I want to build muscle, but I want to do weight training, not even that specifically. I want to use these different weights. And like, I need to know, like, when I show up on this day with my husband, we're going to do this exact regimen. And all of y'all know this, but I think it's just helpful to see, like, outside of business, I could just go to the gym and say, I want to get stronger and go screw around for 45 minutes and do some random stuff. And like do that for a couple months and then be like, why am I not getting stronger? Because I've not necessarily been doing something that actually makes sense because I don't have clarity versus I have these clear goals. I have this clear plan. I have these clear things I'm going to show up for that I can then also measure to see then if that's not yielding the results I want. It's a lot easier to start to look at things like, well, let's look at the action. How much did you actually show up, Kim? Did you actually go 3 days a week or did you like put it in your calendar and not show up, right? So I think using the gym example can be helpful, and Stephanie, I really, really appreciate that in terms of the clarity piece. So with the action piece, really checking in with that. The other piece with action that I really am always looking at, and I think this is so important, and this might surprise you, but I think this is something I'm always checking in with clients and checking in with myself as well when you're not getting the results you want. Is what is the energy and mindset behind the action you're taking? So this is a little bit of mindset and a little bit of action, but I'd categorize this under the action component, but I mean, obviously all of these pieces are interlocking. What I mean by this is there is such a difference between I am taking action to check it off a list or because I think I'm supposed to do it, or basically because I'm just going through the motions, right? I could show up live today and I could kind of phone this in and I could check this off a list and I could just kind of be like, yeah, I went live. I could go tell my coach, I went live every week this month and like, it's not working. I'm not getting a result. But if I was just like phoning it in and not really giving an F and not putting much thought into it or like not really wanting to be here, just kind of checking it off a to-do list, y'all would know the difference, right? Like, and that would yield different results. And so this doesn't mean you have to be perfect. This does not mean you always have to show up at a level 10. This doesn't mean, like, I don't want anyone to hear that, but I think just being honest with what's the mindset and energy. Are you showing up because you really want to be there and you're excited with what you're doing and like you're what's the quote? Are you putting your full ass into it? Are you half-assing or putting your full ass into it? Are you putting your full ass into it or are you half-assing it? And just being honest with yourself. And if it's like, oh, I've been half-assing the way I'm showing up, I haven't been putting my full ass into it, that doesn't mean you're wrong, but that just means that's the opportunity and the gap for you to close. So instead of it's not working, why am I not getting a result? It's like, oh, here's the opportunity. I've just been kind of phoning it in because I was on summer break and I just wanted to enjoy summer a little this month. Good information. Here's the easy thing for me to do. The easiest thing for me to do is like, great. So like, how do I get myself excited about showing up? How do I put my full ass into it again? And so that's the way I invite you to think about it, where it's not, oh, and now you're doing something wrong. It's just, oh, here's the gap to close. Not there are all these problems in your business. And it can just be that simple of a shift. The other two pieces with action that I would take a look at is, are you showing up with expectations and from kind of a transaction mindset or a service mindset? So again, this is a little mindset, but I think it's still in the action category. And what I mean by this is I see such a difference through my clients, and I've seen this in my own business as well, but I think I've always been pretty service oriented. Well, 10 years waiting tables, right? Y'all know this. I love money, but I would do my work for free. So I think I see this more through my clients. But when you're showing up with expectations and when you're showing up as actions and treating them like a transaction, meaning I expect when I show up on this call, someone is supposed to hire me, or I expect when I show up in this live, this should be a transaction and that someone should hire me afterwards. And of course, you're marketing for a business because you want to book clients or you want to fill your programs or you want to sell your courses. Of course, you get to have that positive expectation and regard. But I think there's a very big difference between a service-driven mindset of I am showing up because I want to be of service and because I want to pour value out into the world, because I'm so excited about talking about this and because I think people need to hear this and I know it can help people. And I also know when I show up and serve and when I help people, of course, that's also going to grow my business and bring me clients. I think that's a very different way of showing up to take action than I expect something in return from what I'm doing. Anyone who has ever been in a crappy dating experience with someone who's dating you expecting something in return, right? Like that just doesn't feel very good on the other side. So I don't think anyone does this on purpose. I think it can happen sometimes when we're in, and then I want to see the comments, when we're in scarcity, I think is sometimes when this can happen. So I think, again, no shame. Do not make yourself wrong. I think just noticing, oh, have I maybe been in scarcity? Have I maybe been putting some expectations out there? Maybe the online space has made me believe that I show up on a video and I'm supposed to get a client after that. Where am I maybe showing up with that transactional energy? What would it look like to shift into service-driven energy? Sarah says, I was just going to say that structure, energy, and clarity and what I'm trying to achieve and show up for very important in so many aspects of life. Yes, amen. I mean, really, truly, like pretty much every area of life, I think that's pretty much anywhere we have a goal, that's the case. Third piece on the action, and then there's just one other piece here, so then we'll wrap it up. But the other place I'm looking at with clients with their action, again, like, are we literally showing up and taking action, and how often, and that might also look specifically, if this is helpful to hear, like if I pulled up a client's Instagram, it's not to like call them out, but I might pull it up and I might be like, okay, you did show up, but like you've sold once, you've made one offer in the last 2 months, like yes, you're taking action, but like maybe not the kinds of actions that are actually moving your business forward. So that's something I'd also be looking at and checking in with. But the other thing here in terms of more the energetic piece that I'm checking in with, if someone's taking action, but it's sort of like, okay, we're kind of doing everything right here and it's not yielding the results we would expect, is are we showing up very grippy in the action we're taking? And so this is a little similar to the transaction piece, but I think it's a little different in terms of like it's just a very grippy energy. And I think the shift there is like, what does it look like to this is technically surrender or detachment, but I think for most people, y'all have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think for most of us, when we hear surrender or detach, let go, I think for most of us, we're like, fuck you, Kim, like I would let go if I could, but like what is that? I think it can be such a tough concept until you've been in the experience of what surrender and letting go feels like. So this is the way I frame it. I think this can maybe be an easier way to understand this. I think of this as, how do you take action by leaning in while also leaning back? Meaning, how do you show up to take action fully leaning in with the positive expectation that of course this is gonna work? Like of course I expect this to, like when I show up and when I'm of service and when I'm taking action from a place that feels good, like that's gonna bring me clients, that's gonna bring me results. I'm totally, I need to plug my computer in, y'all. Don't mind me while I do this. Of course I'm showing up and leaning in while also leaning back, in terms of I'm leaning back knowing no single action has to be the action that gives me a result, because I know it's this action or another action that's going to give me a result. I can lean back because I know I trust this is all working and it's all part of a continuum and all of this stacks up. So I know as long as I'm leaning in, I can lean back and trust and be open to receive that it's like, it's going to be this action, right? I'm gonna plant a row of seeds, and because I'm showing up to plant a row of seeds and I'm showing up to water those, I can lean back and also trust those seeds are going to sprout. If I keep watering them, of course they're going to sprout. Maybe one or two don't, but like definitely a couple of those are going to sprout. So maybe that's an easier way to understand that. But that's what I'm also looking at with action. Are we super, super grippy in the action we're taking? And if so, how can we play with that like energy of like absolutely show up 100%, while also just detaching, letting go, leaning back just a little bit in terms of any specific action itself has to give the result. Remembering all of your actions stack up. They all add up to compound. That is, keep using the fitness example, right? That happens in fitness. It's very unlikely I'm going to be super ripped after lifting weights once, especially since lifting the dead, what was it? What are they called? Oh my gosh. What's the bar with the big weights you put on the side? We put weights on the side. I was like, I'm going to hurt my back, right? Like it's very unlikely. I mean, massive muscles from doing that once. It is very likely though, if I keep leaning in to do this over and over and over again, while leaning back, knowing it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, right? That those actions are going to stack up and give me the results I want. And so I think that can be a very helpful frame for action. But that's also something I'm looking at with clients where it's like, if we're showing up consistently, but it's super grippy. I've used this example so many times. When you're super grippy, your hands aren't open, you can't receive, right? That's something I'm looking at in terms of like, well, this is probably the gap to close because that's felt on the other side. And I really believe our audience can tell the difference. I'm pretty sure if I came to live streams where I was like, this live stream needs to book me clients and you all need to hire me. And I was just like feeling, I'm sure y'all would feel that. It would be such a different experience. And so I think just remembering that, and again, don't make yourself wrong. None of this is to make yourself wrong. This is the game we're always playing in business, which is like, how do I keep going through this to identify what is the right gap to close? So if you're feeling grippy, great. Like you just spotted the right gap. You don't need to, like, you stop. You don't have to go any further. Like, this is just the place to work on where it's like, great, what do I need to do to be able to show up to lean in while leaning back? Like, do I need to create some safety for myself? Like, what needs to be addressed there? So hopefully that makes sense. But that is one of the ones, hopefully it doesn't sound too confusing, but I really see that make such a difference for my clients. And I think that's where like knowing some of those nuances, like when I'm coaching my clients through this, these are the things I would invite you to be thinking about. And I'm really kind of going through this order because it wouldn't help me to take a look at with a client with, are they super grippy if we didn't start first with mindset where it's like if their nervous system was super, super jacked up. But you can see if you're going through this where it's like, oh, well, that's why in air quotes it hasn't been working. It's not that it hasn't been working. It's just that I'm showing up to take action in a way that isn't most serving my results. Here's an easy tweak and just the place I can focus on moving forward. And I think that can just make things a little easier. And I'm going to keep reminding y'all through the whole live stream this. And no matter how long you are in business, this is the stuff we're just always looking at, right? I'm constantly looking at my business where I'm like, okay, how do we, like, if we're not getting the results we want, like, what do we need to adjust? Like, what's my energy like? What's my mindset like? Like, have I been taking action? Have I been in a checklist mentality with my, like, just what's the thing to play with here? Last piece then, we've gone through all of this, and it's like my clients, they're super neutral and they're clear on their goals and their strategy and they're showing up consistently and they're coming from a place of service and they're not feeling super grippy and they're still not getting the results they want. This now is the time where like, cool, this is the best place to talk strategy. I'm like, let's roll up our sleeves and talk strategy. I love talking strategy. I love looking at what do we need to tweak, what do we need to adjust. But I don't want to talk this part of the strategy unless we've worked through everything else, because otherwise we're fucking with a recipe that, like, we don't know. We need like a baseline recipe. We need some data first. We need enough action to even have enough data points to know what to adjust. And I'm saying fucking with a recipe because I'm thinking if I was going to make a cake and we had a recipe for a cake and you made it and you baked it and you iced it and we tasted it and we're like, this was good, but we want to improve it. We can't know what to improve in that recipe until we go through that whole process. And what all of us want to do is like, we're making a recipe for the first time. We're like, well, I wonder how this would taste if I added in all this extra shit. And then we have a cake that comes out kind of funky, but we don't know if it was the extra shit we added in or if it was the original recipe or if it's because we added too much salt or too much. But like, it's very, very tough then. So we want to go through everything else. And then if you're at neutral, you've got a strategy, you're showing up for it consistently, you're like, you don't need to be a perfect human, but you're pretty clean energy. Then it's super exciting. So it's like, cool, like, let's dig in and figure out what's going on. And then these are the things I would be looking for if it felt like you weren't getting the results you wanted from your strategy. So the first thing my brain is just always curious about is, where are we seeing a stopping point in your strategy? What I mean by this is, sometimes I'll have someone come to me and they're like, it's not working, or my sales doesn't work, or I'm not booking clients, and my marketing doesn't work, or my messaging doesn't work. And I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. And right, well, I'll hear what's going on, and they're putting stuff out there, they're booking calls, and they've just, I literally, I just had a conversation with someone, and they were telling me, like, this was kind of the story, and they had just booked 5 calls, something like that. And I was like, well, hold on a second. That if you've just booked 5 calls in a very short period of time, what that tells me is that your messaging is probably working, or your visibility is probably working, right? Your marketing is probably working, your messaging is probably working. The front end of your sales process is probably working. People aren't just getting on the phone with you to give you their free time for fun, right? What this tells me is if there's actually something going on here, the stopping point is on the call itself. And that's the like where the kink in the hose is that we want to take a look at, and that's probably where the opportunity is for us to refine what's going on in your sales process and your strategy. And I say this because this is how you identify the right gap, right? So then it's, oh, what's going on in that call? Is it something that's happening in the opening of the call? Is it something that's happening with the way you're pitching your offer? Is it the way you're navigating objections? Is it the way you're following up? Is it your energy? Like, we can kind of go back through what we just talked about, right? Is it that you're feeling super jacked up or not good enough on the call? Like, what's going on the call? Because that's where we have the stopping point. This is the place for us to get curious and to want to refine. But I think, again, what our brains want to do is like, it's not working. We get wrapped around that. And we just go to whatever someone online tells us is the thing that's most important to pay attention to, or what's easiest for us to solve, or what we feel most insecure about. Or, we just start closing the wrong gap. And then it's like, oh, I need to rework my messaging for the 18th time. And it's like, maybe your messaging is just fine. Or maybe it's like what I was using the example of earlier, like my email funnels. My email funnels are fine. Are they great? I don't know. We haven't looked at them in a while, but they're working. That's just not the kink in the hose we need to address. But if you look at any part of the hose, if you look at any part of your business for long enough, I promise you can always find a problem, and there's always something to improve, because that's just the nature of business. It's kind of the mindfuck of business too, which is why I think it's just so much more beneficial to kind of go through the process we talked about, and then where is the kink in the process? That's the place I would invite you to look in. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Because again, if your messaging is working, if you're getting people on the phone, but like the real thing is you freeze up and you're not making an offer, or you don't know how to pitch your offer, or at any time someone gives you an objection, you're just like, cool, bye, right? Like that, you could book 100 calls and it wouldn't matter. You could refine your messaging and it could be amazing, and your sales page could be converting like above industry rates, but it wouldn't matter, because every time someone got on the phone with you, you'd hit the same block and it wouldn't convert. So I think just really, really important there. Just seeing, Stephanie says, you make this all sound so easy, Kim, LOL. Well, thank you, that's my job. I love you for saying that. But I think, Stephanie says, I think it will serve me to go back to the basic process. But I think it's exactly that. I'm glad it sounds so easy. I think I hope what this is helping everyone see is business isn't actually that complicated. I wouldn't say it's easy. I think that's unfair, and that I think business can be challenging. But I think the bigger challenges are actually sitting, like, it just takes time to figure these things out. And it takes time to work these processes. And we have to deal with challenging humans sometimes and things like that. But the business itself, if we look at it, is actually pretty neutral and pretty simple. And that's why I think walking through this process where it's like, if you allow yourself to get to neutral, right, it's actually really hard if our nervous system is jacked up to be able to see how simple it is. But if we allow ourselves to do this, it's so much easier just to notice, oh, well, that's all that's going on. So I would, for everyone here, in terms of like how to figure out where the kink in your hose, whether it's you or the client, I'm just always thinking about, again, where are we seeing the process stopping? So if, for example, I'll use another example here. If it's sort of like I'm taking lots of action, I'm doing lots of things, but I'm not booking calls or getting people to my sales page, or booking people into my webinar, whatever like that next step is for you, I'd be curious about things where I'm like, okay, that's where we're having to stop. So what's going on? Does that mean we're getting a ton of traffic to the sales page, but the sales page isn't converting? Well, that tells me there's something with the sales page. That mean, you know what I mean? That's maybe what's going on. Is it that we're showing up a ton, but when we look at the sales page, it's like 2 people landed there? Well, to me, I'm like, oh, well, then that means we need to rewind the tape even further. The kink's a little earlier. That means either our content and messaging isn't landing, but I want to see, like, let's go back to the content and messaging. Is content and messaging getting in front of a lot of people? Or is it that, like, when we take a look at our content, it's reaching 4 people? Well, then it doesn't matter how amazing your content is or how amazing your messaging is. What we have is a visibility problem, right? We don't have a sales problem. We don't have a conversion problem. We literally just have not enough people are seeing you problem or gap to close. Like, great, this is so much easier, because now we know, like, now what we need to think about is everything we're looking at strategy wise is how do we get you more visible, right? And what's going on there is that do you need to post in Facebook groups? Do you need to get on some podcasts? Do you want to run Facebook ads? But just seeing, like, once we can identify the right gap, it's so much easier then, because then it's not like, oh my gosh, this doesn't work, my business doesn't work, like, figure this out for me. It's like, oh, this is actually really simple. Like, all of these are actually very simple things to adjust, where it's like, it doesn't mean there isn't work involved, but so much easier if you're like, oh, I have a visibility gap. Cool, my whole job right now is to figure out how to get more visible and get in front of more people. That's my whole job. And then when that's working, you're like, oh, I've gotten more visible. Then you just get to see, like, is the hose, like, is water running through the hose, or is there another kink? Great. Where's the kink stopping next? I've gotten visibility, and it's going to my landing page, and the calls are actually booking through, and the person Kim just talked about, I'm getting a bunch of calls, and now we're just having a kink on the calls themselves. Great. Now we know what to address there. Or, so on and so on. So I think just allowing yourself to play that game and being gentle with yourself and just reminding yourself it is a process for everyone, but I think the less pressure and the less mean you are to yourself, and the more you just normalize that this is what every single business is doing this. It has to go through this, or went through this. If they're not going through it now, right, they went through it, and they're still going through it in some degree. And I've told all of y'all in various live streams here, right? The reason we had those strategic stories at Sell Masterclass a couple weeks ago, was it end of last year? I started noticing, like, our content isn't performing the same way it used to. But it was exactly what we're talking through here. And I was just very neutral. And I'm like, what like, I just got curious about it. I'm like, oh, what's going on is things have changed in the online space. We're not getting the same rate. Like, what do we need to do here? I'm doing the things for visibility, so something else is up. Like, oh, I think it's that we need to just update messaging a little bit, and we need some more stories because AI came out, and the content that performed really well 2 years ago, it's not that it's not performing, it's just not performing the same way, right? But it just helped me to problem solve and to close the right gap, instead of, oh my gosh, this means my business is falling apart, or my content sucks, or I suck. It's like, no, this is just something that happened in our online space, and this is just something that I'm noticing, and this is where the kink in the hose is. Great, easy thing. And I did have a bit of a visit. We started doing more Instagram collaborations on Instagram. Oh my gosh, platform, my brain, end of the day. I'm just sharing this just so you can see, like, every stage of business. But one of the things I noticed, I was like, oh, I want to get in front of more people who are my people. And Facebook, like, our group grows really well here, but Instagram, like, I hate to say it, but I've, like, basically neglected Instagram for 7.5 years in business. And I think I've told you all this. At the start of my business, I made the idiotic mistake, and I'm saying idiotic for a reason, of getting one of those, like, bots that, like, helped you, like, followed or engaged and followed with people on Instagram. So my Instagram account, like, really got screwed up from that. I highly recommend never doing that, but it's good. I lived and I learned, and I can teach everyone that. But my Instagram account just didn't have the visibility and the reach it wanted. So that's just so helpful for me to see, where it's like, great, where's the kink in the hose on Instagram? We want to give that a little more love. It's a little bit of visibility. It's a little bit of reach. We know why. So how can we solve that? There's lots of ways to solve that. One of the ways I solve that, I'm like, what would be really fun for me? The way I can show up and be in service, right? The way I can get excited about the action I'm taking. The way I can lean in by also leaning back. It's like, I'm doing some collaborations with people I really love to show them off, to bring some people over to my account, and that worked really beautifully. So I'm just showing this as an example. I'm like, this happens at every stage of business, and we're just always looking at where's the kink in the hose, what's the right gap to close. But it's tough to look at where's the kink in the hose if we're not taking enough action to have enough data, right? If we haven't made the recipe and baked the cake once, it's hard for us to know if they're, like, what's going on. I know I'm mixing metaphors here, but I think y'all can follow my metaphors. And it's hard to take enough action and to get enough data points if we're just spinning out all of the time and feeling not good enough, or thinking we suck, or thinking our business doesn't work, or thinking that everyone else has it figured out, or that someone else has a secret, or if we don't have clarity on our business offer or on what we're doing, right? So that's why if someone comes to me and they say it's not working, and hopefully my clients aren't saying it's not working, right? But they're coming to me and they're like, hey, I'm really frustrated. I feel like I'm not getting the results I want. Like, we're problem solving this together. That's why these are the things I'd want to coach them through, so that we can get to a place where we're neutral and we can then just say, where's the kink in the hose? I mean, I'm not literally asking them that, but so we can take a look at that. And again, I'm just going to keep saying this, and then just to keep normalizing, and that might mean this is an ongoing process, or that might mean in a couple months there's a different kink in the hose, and just seeing that's totally, totally normal and kind of the game we're all playing. And I reflect that because I think that's the other, like kind of the closing piece here. I think the more we can see, that's why it's like not every, most strategies work if you work them. But this is what it means to work a strategy. What it means to work a strategy, is what we're talking about at the beginning of the live stream, is not just keep doing the same thing over and over again without making any adjustments or changes or taking a look at it and expecting different results. Sometimes it's literally doing that because we're not taking enough action, but it's working. This is what working a strategy means. It's understanding what's the right gap to close, and understanding no matter how well a strategy works for you, you're just always going to be working it, meaning taking action on it, or your team taking action on it, but also just looking at what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be refined, what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be up leveled, what worked in 2020 that doesn't work in 2023 anymore, right? And just knowing that is just normal in business. And I think the more we can see that is just normal, like that is just the game we're playing in business. And I go to the gym and I lift weights, right? For the rest of my time going to the gym, I'm going to always be having to work my workout and probably making small adjustments and small refinements and small tweaks and like noticing my form and noticing this workout works better for, or like this machine works better for me. I don't know. Y'all get what I'm saying with the analogy, but like that's just the nature of working out and staying in shape. It's not like I'm going to figure it out and then never have to look at that ever again. Like that's just the game I'm playing in fitness. Same here. And so I think knowing that can also be helpful, because then we can start to get out of that narrative of, oh my gosh, it's not working, instead of, no, this is just business. This is the game we signed up for. How fun is this game? I think it's such a better mentality, and like we just get to find the right gap to close this week, this month, this year. And I think when you can take that mentality, it makes it easier to enjoy the process. And I think the more you can enjoy the process of business and finding the gaps to close, even if that's mindset and you're frustrated, you're allowed to be frustrated, right? But I think the more we can have that mentality of like, how can I treat this like a game, see this as the process, see this as normal, get behind this, get excited about figuring this out. Kind of like with fitness, if I'm like, ugh, I have to go do that, versus like, this is fun, like this is the game of it, like how can I figure this out, how can I gamify this, how can I enjoy the process? I think the easier and easier business gets, and the easier it gets to also be in the business for the long game, for long enough for those crops to sprout up and yield you, for those seeds to sprout into crops to yield you crops for years and years and years. And y'all know I think there's no secret to business, but I would say if there was a secret to business, I think one of the secrets is really finding that way to enjoy the process for this exact reason. So I hope that is beneficial for you. Just seeing, I don't think we have any other questions. Before I hop off, let me know if you have any questions about this, if anything wasn't clear at all. Definitely want to make sure I answer this, and that this is helpful for you. But again, I think just seeing like, of course, this is ongoing work, because the industry's changed, your audience changes, you change, your offers change. And so I think, again, I just like want to like, I'm like hitting all over the head with this, but I want to, because I think somewhere in our online space, there's been a message where it's like, you figure it out once and then everything is perfect, and then you never have to figure out anything again, and that's what makes you successful, it makes you a boatload of money. And I think that's just can be so harmful, because that's just not it at all. Instead of like, we just get to turn this into a game, like what's the right lever to press at any given time. If you have any questions, pop them below. If you're watching the replay, feel free to throw questions for me. I will either answer them in the comments, or if it's a question that like needs a longer answer, I'll answer it in an upcoming live stream or on my podcast. We've been doing the You Asked, I Answered episodes. I've been loving getting questions from people. I got a couple of great questions earlier this week, so I will always make sure I answer those, obviously, if it's within my wheelhouse. And if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, this is great. Stephanie says, thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. And Stephanie says this was great. And thank you for saying that. Love y'all for being here live. If any of you are listening to this and you're like, I would just really like the kind of coaching support that partners with me, that is not going to make me feel wrong, that wants me to bring my challenges to a call, that's not going to be mad at me if I'm frustrated, or if I'm, feeling just like emotional because I'm not getting the results I want, but that's also going to help me get to neutral and manage my mind, that is going to lovingly be neutral and not co-sign my bullshit, but also like help me process through stuff and like be a human, having a human experience, and then get to neutral to take a look at, hey, what's the lever, the clarity, strategy, the mindset in my business, to get really clear on the right gap to solve, and create those strategies that work for you to bring in results, to bring in the right fit leads that turn into right fit clients. That is what I support my clients with. I love my clients. I love this work. I clearly love the process of business, but I love my clients and this work, and it would be an honor to connect with you. We have openings in September. I think we have one intensive. I'm just gonna say I'm opening one more intensive in August, but then other spots will be for September. But I definitely have a coaching spot in September opening up, so I will drop a discovery call link for that. I would love to connect with you if that's something you're interested in. If it feels like that's the kind of coaching support you want, you are my people, and I would love to connect with you. And if for some reason we're not a fit, I do believe coaching chemistry is such a thing, and fit is very important to me because the majority of my clients work with me for the long term. I will so happily refer you to someone who I trust would be a good fit instead. So no, what I was gonna say, like, there's no loss in signing up for the call. Sarah says this was great. Oh, thank you all. I love you so much. Thank you for being here, and then I will see you all next week. Lots of love. Bye.